Again, welcome. God bless you all to another Sunday session for Connecting here at Connected Church. This is Charles Botts, the founder here, and we want to welcome you to our Sunday session. This is our weekly service, worship service, Sunday service, and we're so grateful that you are able to join us. If you're joining us live, if you're catching the rebroadcast on one of our live streams, however you're engaging with us, we're so grateful and honored to have you with us. So thank you once again for making your way, excuse me, to Connected Church. And we are so grateful for you. I want to jump right into it. And one of the things that I had shared when we kicked this off, when we first started this in June, one of the things that I thought was very important about the ministry is that we would sort of push the boundaries of what we expect from church, that we would push the boundaries of what we would expect from a ministry, that we would not be intimidated, that we would not be ashamed or shy to do things differently, to be a little unconventional in what happens in and around the church. And so we're going to do that today. We're going to do things a little differently today. We're going to kind of switch up the delivery, if you will. And so I want to talk about a subject that's very important. I think it's a subject that's very timely. It's an older subject. I think it's been approached a couple different ways. I'm going to make my attempt to talk with us, to share with us on something that I'm calling, hey, Bevy, Bev Pruding, love you, sweetheart. Great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to talk to you about the subject of embracing diversity. Embrace diversity. So I'm sharing my screen. You're going to see the PowerPoint come up here in just a second. And so we're going to embrace diversity. And what I mean by that, because there's a lot of different ways to slice this, but let me let you know where we're going. Where we are going is we are going to a place where we're going to learn how to avoid some of the challenges, some of the conflict that happens around diversity. And in instances where we can't maybe necessarily avoid it, that we have some tools to work through it, that we have some tools to resolve some of the challenges, to resolve some of the conflict that comes from diversity. Why is this so important? And yes, Ms. Queen, I agree with you. It is an important topic. And this is so important because one of the missions of Connected Church, one of the pillars of the work that we have been called to do, is to bind each other with God. And in binding, B-I-N-D, we are building, we are inclusive, we are nurturing, and we're developing. And part of that inclusivity is embracing diversity and all its different machinations and all its different variations. And so if we are going to be a truly diverse ministry, if we're going to be a truly diverse work, then we have to also be prepared to take on and address some of the challenges that come with being diverse. And so we're gonna empower you this morning. We're gonna give you some tools to help us work through that. So I want to start with this. Start with a quick little disclaimer. Listen, diversity comes in a variety of shapes and sizes, and so we are not going to do diversity, big, capital D, diversity any justice today, because we just don't have the time. I mean, we could do, we could do a week-long session where we met every day for a week, and we would still not cover all of the different facets of diversity. So in particular, we're going to be examining, we're going to be looking at a particular slice of diversity, and that's actually cultural diversity. And again, this is another massive topic. It's another expansive topic, but it's one that I think is particularly important when we think about ministry, when we think about church, when we think about our faith. And so one of the things that has always been troubling for me is the sometimes the lack of openness when it comes to the church. In particular, we are Christians here. So as it pertains to the Christian church, I think sometimes we do not recognize, I think in some respects, the impact that culture has and has had on our faith. And culture has had a significant impact on the Christian faith. God bless you, C. Liff, Clifton Jones in the building. I love you, man. Miss you. So grateful that you could stop in and say hey for a minute. So we're going to be looking at cultural diversity. So when I say culture, what do I mean? What am I referring to? So I think it's important that we're on the same page in terms of terminology. And so culture, when we refer to culture, we're referring to a set of norms. We're referring to a set of accepted behaviors, activities, practices that come from a particular group of people, a particular society or civilization. That civilization, that society, many times is formed around a particular set of behaviors, a particular set of norms. And those norms, those behaviors are what make up that society, that civilization's culture. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about culture. We're talking about looking at, thinking about some of those norms, some of the expressions that come out of culture, that come out of a particular civilization. I think it's also important to then recognize and understand that religion many times represents a subculture of a larger society, a larger civilization. That there was a time when culture was informed by religion, and now I think we are living in an era, we're living in a time, and we have been for quite some time, not to get too academic on folks, but I know that my audience, with my family, will stay with me, particularly when we think about and look at what is considered postmodern civilization, sort of the era of the awakening, the acceptance and the recognition of the value that academy, that intellect has in society. And so as we live in a postmodern world, culture has taken on influences and identity of which religion is a piece, but religion doesn't necessarily dominate the culture in ways that it had previously. And so when we are talking about culture, I think it is then further important to talk about contact that happens when various cultures or different cultures or diverse cultures come together. There is what is referred to as cultural contact. Cultural contact can be negative, it can be positive, or it can be neutral. There are instances throughout our society here in the West, in particular here in the United States, that represent cultural contact. There's a couple images on the screen to give you an idea. A big one, and there's lots of articles and studies that folks can do if they're curious. But in particular, Christmas, right? Christmas, one of the big, if you know it, and interestingly, from a Judeo-biblical Christian perspective, Christmas is not the main holiday, right? For many Christians, and particularly when we think about Christianity as it was forming, and the centuries post Christ's crucifixion and resurrection, when we're talking about early church, and even as the church is forming, the Passover and resurrection were considered the high holy days. It was many, many years before Christians even acknowledged, recognized, or attempted to celebrate the Messiah's birth. Hey, Andrea, love you, sweetheart. So great that you're on, stopping by and hanging out with us for a little bit. Tell my baby Malcolm I love him and happy birthday. I texted his dad earlier, but since you're on, I'll give him a shout out too. My little nephew, grandson. Don't ask me to explain nephew, grandson. I don't have time to do that right now, but my little nephew, grandson is celebrating a birthday today. So Christmas was not, for many, many, many years, a widely celebrated holiday in the Christian faith. And in particular, the Christmas that we know today, with all of the trappings, very little of that can be traced to kind of biblical tradition. Much of what we associate with Christmas today, the gift giving, the evergreen tree, decorating the tree, the holly, caroling, all of those elements, all of those icons of Christmas can be traced back to many pagan cultures. In fact, much of a Christmas celebration can be traced back to Roman holidays and tradition, and Norse holidays and traditions. And so cultural contact is a real thing. And so what happens when cultures come together is that there is many times, if not a full blending, a borrowing of various elements. Of course, again, big time in the U.S. is at what point did football become associated with Thanksgiving? But, you know, for many, I'm not talking about a small element. For much of North America and United States specifically, football has become interwoven with Thanksgiving. And so you can see cultures bleeding into one another, cultures borrowing elements from each other. It's so important to acknowledge and recognize that cultural contact is many times done for survival. I don't want to spend too much time here, but I think it's important, especially for Christians, to appreciate what has gone into the elements that make up what we associate with kind of modern Christianity. And so when we think about music in service, and in particular, and more expressive churches, hey, Christina Bartuca, love you, girl. Great to have you on with us. Great to see you again. In many ministries, there's a lot, especially now. Look, don't y'all fall out with me now. Now, come on, we're friends. We're talking about culture. We're talking about diversity. But in particular, in a lot of Black churches, there's a lot of percussion. There's a lot of music. There's the organ. There's a lot of enthusiasm and expressiveness when it comes to, in particular, the music, or what we might call the worship portion of the service. Well, a lot of that came from, now remember, we came to this continent not as Christians. We did not come to this continent as Christians, right? I think we're all comfortable and understand that former enslaved people that were enslaved, did not come to this continent, did not come to the Caribbean practicing Christianity. So it was a faith that was thrusted upon us. And for many of our ancestors, it was a faith that was embraced because they did recognize hope, and they did recognize benefit, and they did meet and acknowledge and experience God. And it was also a survival mechanism. What are you talking about, Charles? Many of us have heard the term. You may be familiar with a practice that was called field hollers. Field hollers were hymns. They were spirituals. They were hymns. They were songs that were sung, songs that were taught to the slaves, the enslaved individuals. And the enslaved individuals then took those songs and embedded hidden messages in the songs. One of the most famous, I'm sure many folks are aware of this, one of the most famous field hollers was "Wade in the Water." Wade in the water, God's gonna trouble the water, which was a way to communicate that some enslaved folks were planning to escape. They were planning to run away. And so messages were encoded in that. And so we understand, we recognize that cultural contact in many times is also a result of survival, a way to sustain, maintain a sense of self in the middle of an overwhelming and in many cases oppressive cultural majority. And so where do we go from here, and how does that express himself? Well, some important terminology. Ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism, you can see the definition right up there on the screen. Essentially, it is a belief that your culture is better, that your culture is superior, that your culture is the best. And so as a result, then, your activities, your expression, your communication, all of that is informed by this perspective that what you have is the best, that what you have is superior, that everyone else is deceived, everyone else is less than, everyone else is sub, and that then compels you, if this is a perspective that you take, that then compels you to live a certain way. Ethnocentrism is tied very closely to nationalism. Those that espouse very strong nationalistic views really are, in a sense, practicing ethnocentrism. Why is this important? It's important because this is one of the things that we want to be careful not to espouse, especially in our attempt to share the good news of Jesus Christ with others. We want to share the good news in a way that does not take the default perspective that everyone else is less than. Now, here's one of the things that I want to be very clear with, family, and I may lose some friends over this, but I need to be very clear. Here at Connected Church, we are unapologetically Christian. That means we live a life with the understanding that God provided an opportunity for humanity to have a closer relationship with their Creator through the teachings, through the life, through the mission of Jesus Christ, the embodiment, the incarnation of the one Creator God. And that true peace and relationship with the one Creator God can only be found in the life, the teachings, and the gift provided through Jesus Christ. I don't want there to be any confusion about that. And so with that understanding, Here at Connected Church, we also have a very strong conviction that Jesus Christ is the way. There are not multiple ways. There is, from our perspective, there is one path to relationship with the Creator God, and that's through Jesus. Period. Next sentence. We also do not simultaneously put down, disregard, marginalize, or belittle any other belief system that brings an individual peace, comfort, and the ability to interact productively and in a healthy way in the larger global society. We do not do that. We are not going to use Christ as an opportunity to marginalize Muhammad. We are not going to use Christ as an opportunity to marginalize Shinto, Buddhism, Hinduism, atheism, agnosticism. We are not going to use Christ to do that. And Christians, many of us have been guilty for a long time of ethnocentrism. And so we are not going to take the perspective that Christ came for us to use as a weapon to destroy others. There is one way. There is one way. It is through Jesus Christ. And at the same time, as a believer in the salvation that comes through Christ, I can also recognize that for others, they may not be yet ready to receive the gift that comes from Christ. And so it is my responsibility to project a love. It is our responsibility to project a love and a conviction that is unmatched by anything else that anyone else could put forward. I hope that's okay. I hope that folks are with me and that folks are hearing what I'm saying. So there's ethnocentrism, which is also very damaging. And then there are gender roles and stereotypes that can be equally as damaging. Again, you can see the definition there, but there's this idea, this concept when it comes to gender roles in particular, that there are things that only men can do, there are things that only women can do, and that is it. And there is a real danger in restricting the creation to standards defined by society and not defined by God. Now, we spent the last 3 weeks in a series that we called Is My Life My Life? And we were looking at, in particular, Jeremiah 18, where God tells Jeremiah, go down to the potter's house, and he would give him a message. And one of the things that Jeremiah saw is that in the hands of the potter, a vessel could be whatever the potter was forming the vessel to be. I'm here to tell you that in the hands of our God, a woman can be whatever God has shaped and molded that woman to be. A man can be whatever God has shaped and molded that man to be. That it is not up to society to create these lanes in which a male and female cannot depart. It is not up to society to define what someone can or cannot do based on the gender, based on the sex that was assigned at birth. I need us to understand that. I need us to recognize and appreciate that we have been created by a creator, by a single creative entity that has purpose and design in mind when creation happens. There are no mistakes. And so it is not up to humanity to determine where someone can go in life and what someone can do in life simply based on gender assigned at birth. It is not our responsibility. It is the responsibility of society to create a space, particularly a society that espouses Christ's values, to create a space where each of us can grow and move and develop into what our Creator has designed and purposed for us to do and to be. And so how is this lived out? How is this manifest? Well, stereotypes, and in particular assigning gender roles, can influence how we treat others. And I know that there are folks watching and listening that have experienced some sort of discrimination or have experienced some sort of interaction that was based on nothing more than their gender. I know it. I'm certain of it. Stereotypes can also create an environment where we limit or increase expectations based on that gender, based on that gender. Equally dangerous, equally limiting. And so, yes, we absolutely can then recognize and acknowledge that faulty assumptions, that false information, false conclusions have been drawn based simply on the stereotypes that were assigned to gender. You're looking for explanations, you're looking for reasons, you're looking for determinations in behavior based on false assumptions that you associate with a particular gender. That's the mistake that we make, is we will get confused that a woman will respond to a set of stimuli a particular way because we've assigned behavior to that woman. We get confused when a man responds differently than we expect because we've assigned a set of behaviors to that man. In a diverse ministry, we are not going to limit someone based on gender roles and stereotypes. Here at Connected Church, we're not going to do that. And furthermore, then, we are going to avoid any sort of disconnect with an outcome because we placed those assumptions on an individual ahead of time amiss. We're not going to do that. Now, is it appropriate to hold expectations for an individual's behavior? Absolutely. It is absolutely appropriate to expect that someone is going to carry themselves, regardless of gender, someone is going to carry themselves in a way that's respectful, in a way that values community over self. These are expectations that we have associated with the activities and the work of My Connected Church. And those are very clear expectations that will be communicated, but are also held to be understood. And that is appropriate. What's not appropriate is to stereotype. What's not appropriate is to say this is what someone can be and this is what someone cannot be based on nothing else other than that assigned gender. And so with that understanding, how do we then begin to work out, how do we then begin to position ourselves, to prepare ourselves for life and for community that accepts and welcomes diversity? Well, one of the things that we have to do is we have to recognize and acknowledge that body language and gestures is different for different people, for different groups of people. That these things, these are some examples here, that depending on where you are in the world, depending on in which culture you are interacting, have very different meanings. Eye contact in some cultures, in some societies, a subordinate does not make eye contact with a superior, whether it's in a professional situation or in a household. There are some cultures where making eye contact can be insulting, where making eye contact can be threatening. And so then certainly the reverse is true, where there are some cultures here in the U.S., look at me when I'm talking to you, right? How many parents have said that to their kids? Look at me when I'm talking to you. Because for us, eye contact means that I have your attention. Eye contact means that you are hearing me, that you're paying attention, that you are receiving what I'm saying. So very different. Handshakes, very different. Some cultures do not shake hands. I think less and less cultures are going to be shaking hands. Now we realize how easy it is to share germs and to spread germs. But again, in different ways to shake hands. Some cultures shake hands. Some cultures don't. How we greet one another in different cultures, in different environments, very different. Our understanding of personal space. There are some societies, some cultures where there is not enough room. Just square feet wise, there's not enough room for you to have your personal. This is my bubble. This is my bubble. You in my bubble. Don't enter my bubble. Don't get in my bubble. No, boo. We don't have enough space for all that. You don't get a bubble. Hey, Sage, my good friend Jen Fields has just hopped on to say, hey, love you, Sage, miss you, hope you're doing well, blessings to the family. So, there are some spaces, some places where you don't get personal space just because of the environment. And you can kind of see the rest there. Touch, personal hygiene. Think about how obsessed we are in the U.S. with aroma. Just the fragrance industry alone is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And the majority of that comes from money spent here in the West. We are obsessed with aroma. That is not the case everywhere else in the world. There are many other parts of the world that think about hygiene very differently, particularly if you don't have access to heated indoor plumbing. And we know that is not the case everywhere in the world. Furthermore, showering, a hot shower for much of the world is a luxury. So just, hygiene is one of those things that's very different. So family, we need to be aware of these things, that as we put an emphasis on diversity, as we put an emphasis on inclusion, as we put an emphasis on embracing difference, we have to recognize and acknowledge that different cultures, different societies look at these sorts of things differently. And so we just have to be open to that. And then furthermore, we have to get really good at distinguishing this idea, recognizing this idea of normal. What's normal? Distinguishing normal from abnormal behavior. It can be difficult and treacherous, can be a challenge, because we decide what normal is. And there's a real challenge in that. Perspective plays a huge role in what's considered normal. And so one of the things that we are going to become experts at in Connected Church, we are going to be experts in empathy. Put that in the chat if you're with me. If you're tracking with me, put in the chat, I'm going to be an expert in empathy. I'm going to be an empathy expert. You're an EE. You're an empathy expert. If you're with me, put that in the chat. We're going to be empathy experts. We are going to excel at putting ourselves in someone else's shoes. We're not going to feel on behalf, feel for that person. That's what sympathy is, feeling for that person. No, we're going to feel on behalf of that person. We are going to inconvenience ourselves to the place where we try to look at life through the lens of someone else. Try this on. We're going to do an exercise. We're going to do an exercise together, okay? We're going to do an exercise in empathy. Okay, imagine that you grow up in a home where much of your needs and wants have been essentially provided for with little or no effort from your part. That you don't have to invest a lot of effort personally in the benefits that come into your home, that there's always enough to eat, that the lights are always on, it's always warm in the winter, it's always cool in the summer, that you get plenty of gifts at Christmas time. You have a variety of entertainment available to you. You have a variety of apparel, of clothing to wear. And so you have grown up in this environment where much of what you've come to expect a fairly comfortable existence. And not only was this the case for you, but this was the case for your parents when they grew up. And in fact, it was the case for their parents, your grandparents, when they grew up. That you would have to go back many, many generations to find relatives, ancestors that struggled to live and exist. That your family has come far beyond that. And so it not only has this been your experience growing up, it's your expectation that that's going to be your experience into adulthood and for your family, for your children, for your family. And so you have this expectation, and all of a sudden, you start to become aware that your comfortable lifestyle is starting to erode, that there are changes in the society, there are changes in your civilization that are causing your comfort to erode a bit. I love you, Pastor Roland Casadegozo. Welcome, love y'all. Thank you so much for jumping in. Cheryl, my neighbor, good friend Cheryl, love you, Miss Cheryl. Welcome, great to have you in with us. So we're doing, if you just joined us, we're doing an exercise in empathy. So we're imagining a time where we for generations, our family has lived very comfortably. Our family has lived with very little need. And now, even though it's my expectation that that's what's going to be the case for my children, now I'm noticing, I'm experiencing an erosion of that expectation. It hasn't yet sort of hit my everyday experience, but there's a sense, there's messages, there's information that continues to come at me that's telling me what I have come to live with, what I've come to expect from my life is going to change. And not only is it going to change, it's actually going to get harder for me. And it's going to get harder for my children. But there's something I can do about it. Wouldn't you jump at that opportunity? How many of us, if we had a chance to do something about our situation, that we felt was going to allow us to preserve our normal, to preserve our comfort, how many of us would not jump at the opportunity to do that? Well, friends, family, I'm not talking about a made-up scenario. I'm talking about a very real scenario that's happening in our country. And it's happening for a large number of our white brothers and sisters, because they grew up in a country that reflected their norms, that reflected their normal, their expectations, that reflected what they valued. And now they see that country changing. And it's changing in a way that makes them fearful their normal won't be normal, and that they may lose what they've grown up to expect from their life in the United States. Can you begin to appreciate now why some would fight so hard to hold on to what they've held on to forever? It's not hard to understand. Having said that, it also then doesn't make it okay to react violently to change, particularly if we are not taking the time to fully appreciate the extent of the change. And I think for many of us, we recognize that the change that's happening really is for everyone's betterment, because it means that more people are getting access, and that's a good thing. And that's a good thing. And so now that we have this understanding, we have this appreciation of the impact of embracing diversity in our ministry, what do we do as we embrace diversity? We open up opportunity for conflict. Remember, cultural contact is not always positive. That cultural contact can have negative implications, and that some folks will resist very hard the idea of cultural contact. And so we want to empower you. We want to give you some tools. We want to walk away from this with some tools on how to resolve conflict. One of the ways to resolve conflict is in our being. It's in our being. We can resolve conflict by improving communication. Communication is a key to inciting and resolving conflict. If you want to start some mess, that is with your communication. But simultaneously, if you want to stop some mess, if you want to resolve some mess, you can do that through your communication. So we can start by being more accepting. We can start by being more attentive. We can listen to what's not being said, and it becomes our responsibility for being more connected. It's not just on one individual or one group's a responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the minority to open themselves up and put themselves forward with connecting. It's also the responsibility of the majority to be, and in some instances, it may be more of the majority's responsibility to be more open and to be more ready to connect with others. So we can resolve conflicts in our communication by being more accepting, by being more attentive, by listening to what's not being said. Remember, body language can kind of throw us. So you got to be careful with body language, because just because someone is making eye contact or avoiding eye contact doesn't mean that they're not listening, doesn't mean that they're offended. We have to be careful with body language, but that doesn't mean it should be ignored. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't listen for cues and be very attentive. When you're attentive, you can hear what's not being said. When you're attentive, you can hear what's not being said. In our written communication, this is one, family, in full disclosure, I am working on regularly, but in our written communication, you want to modulate it, you want to modify your written communication for the audience. That an email I send to my supervisor is going to be worded differently than a blog post that I write for the ministry. It's going to be worded differently than a tweet that I put out for myself and my organizing and my political action activity. Those are different audiences, and so the communication is going to be different. What should be consistent, though, is that we are clear, that our communication is clear. And so it's very important, particularly in more professional communication, particularly in more functional communication, that we want to review it. You want to review it. Read it out loud. Read it to yourself out loud. You may not always have access to someone coming in and rereading it for you. When you do, it's always helpful to get a second set of eyes, a third pair of eyes on a thing. But in those instances where maybe you don't, or just, it's not necessarily that much of a priority, you still want to take the time, reread what you're going to write out loud to ensure that you are not being offensive. And so again, very difficult to appreciate from someone else's perspective, but because we're going to be experts in empathy, because we're empathy experts, we're EE here at MCC. Woo! MCC, the EEs, My Connected Church, the empathy experts. Y'all catch all that? So because we're empathy experts, we are going to focus very much on trying to appreciate how something can sound to someone else that maybe does not share our background, is maybe English is not their first language. And so some jargon, some terminology may get lost. We're going to consider all of that when we share any written communication. And then finally, family, we're going to be careful with our use of I statements. What's appropriate and what's inappropriate? What can calm a situation down and what can cause a situation to erupt? And I think many of us have been in this situation. My wife and I are trying very hard to hold one another accountable for how we speak to each other and how we speak to our children in particular. This is something that I am really working on. I want y'all to pray with me on this. Being very, very careful with how I communicate with my children, with what are inappropriate statements. And what's so interesting is that we need to learn, all of us need to learn, particularly in situations of conflict, that it's not about winning. Here at Connected Church, we are never going to teach you how to win the argument. We are not a debate ministry. God bless those ministries that feel they have been called to debate and feel that they've been called to show the error in other ways and the fault in other beliefs. I certainly can appreciate that may have some benefit. I'm grateful that that's not what God called me to do. That's not what God called us to do. We did not get called to win the argument. We were not called here at Connected Church to win the debate. And so we are going to be very much aware of inappropriate statements, of inappropriate reactions to something. And so there are some examples up on the screen, if you can see. I can't believe you did that. That's an inappropriate statement. I can't believe you did that. I do that all the time. And instead think about a better way to say that, which might be, can you help me understand what happened? Tell me what happened. Explain to me what happened. Walk me through it so that I can appreciate what's going on. Inappropriate. You're wrong. That's stupid. How could you say that? You're wrong. That's inappropriate. Instead, I see your point, or I can appreciate your perspective. Have you considered this? And if there's other information, have you considered this perspective? Have you considered my perspective? I see your perspective. Have you considered my perspective? No. Yeah, no can be inappropriate. Now, sometimes no can be appropriate. Daddy, can I touch the open flame on the stove? No, you cannot. No, I don't. Let them touch the stove. It'll be hot. And there are some instances where you do have to learn. But if the child is smart enough to ask, can I touch the fire? We're going to say no. And that's going to be very appropriate. But there are times where no is inappropriate, where there needs to be more, where there should be more. And instead of no, you could say, well, that's actually, that's incorrect, or that doesn't go far enough. There's actually more to it. Inappropriate, You're just, that we're not building. You can't build a relationship with Again, I'm guilty. I'm preaching to myself, fam. I don't want anyone to think that I am above. I am preaching to myself. And so instead go further and, yes, of course, absolutely. Yes, we can talk about that some more. We are a diverse ministry. We are going to continue to grow as a diverse ministry. We're going to continue to put emphasis on being a diverse ministry. And a large part of that, a big part of being a diverse ministry, is recognizing and acknowledging that conflict may arise. And so there are some tools. We have some ways to resolve conflict, to avoid conflict. And one of the most important aspects, one of the most important resources available to us is here at Connected Church. We are and are going to be empathy experts here at Connected Church. God bless you, family. I appreciate you so very much for being on with us. We went over our time today. We went a little bit longer, but I think this was good. I think this was important, and hopefully we found benefit from it. As we close out, Father God, I pray that your Spirit would smile upon each and every home that is represented by the Connected Church family, each and every extended family, extended member of our ministry, of your work. We pray, Lord, that you would bless them, that you would pour your Spirit out, Father God, that you would help us to become empathy experts, that you would help us to appreciate the value in each and every one of your creations. Our mission of righteousness and restorative justice starts with the understanding, with the recognition that each of us is the image of our single creator God. That's what righteousness is recognizing the right image that we each hold, because we are all the reflection of our single creator God. And so, Father, we are going to become experts in empathy because righteousness is essential to our ministry. Father, hold this word in our heart. Teach us to be more appropriate in our communication. Help us to be more loving, more kind in our interactions, that we as a family can become more connected. God bless y'all so much. I appreciate you. Please stop by Connected Church if you have some time. Our website, myconnectedchurch.com. Sign up, engage with our content there as we are continuing to grow and share the great things that God is doing. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay in this fight. Love y'all so much. Peace. Love you, Cliff. Peace, man. We'll see you next week, bro.